yang to me yang to Z. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me, 'cause I'll win, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me whole. I feed on the fear of the devil inside, of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a warrior, this is my song. I am a warrior and this is my song. I'm basking the glow of the rising war, lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you, Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
Welcome to Stu and the Nun presents Lima Charlie, episode 14 with John Kaiser Jr. Thank you, John, for coming on. Tell us about yourself.
You know, I joined the Army right out of high school, went to Fort Benning Infantry School, Airborne School, went to the 82nd Airborne Division for about 3 years, went to Operation Southern Watch to go babysit Patriot missiles in Kuwait while I was there, and kind of thought I would do more while I was there, but that was in like 99, and that was about it. So when my re-enlistment window opened, I kind of wanted to come back to Washington, so Fort Lewis was the place to be, and the Stryker Brigade was Shinseki's baby at the time, so figured if anybody was going to go somewhere, that would be a good place to go.
So did you grow up wanting to join the Army or be in the military?
You know, when I was younger, like going to fairs and stuff and seeing the recruiters, I kind of always wanted to. I grew up listening to stories of 3 great uncles that were all infantry in World War II. One of them was in the first Special Service Force, and he's the one that did not come home from World War II. So it was pretty fitting that I did some time in airborne infantry.
Right. And so because of them, you wanted to be infantry. You didn't think of any other.
Yeah, they're like, what do you want to do? And I was like, airborne infantry. And they're like, are you sure? And the station commander was infantry, so he's like, come here, I got you.
All right. So obviously you're Fort Bragg and Fort Lewis. You were active duty. So did you transfer to the Guard or anything, or
no?
All active duty.
I was gonna stay in the Army until the point where the Army told me they no longer needed my services. And once I got hurt on my second tour in Iraq,
right,
they offered me a desk or home, and it was time to go home.
Okay. So you go to anything interesting at Fort Bragg? That was my last duty station before I got out. But so anything interesting while you're at Fort Bragg?
I mean, we trained, and I mean, you're running off of a very proud legacy. So the discipline, like, it was a pretty good first duty station for a private in the Army.
Right.
Like,
I remember they had the sign. I forget what street it was on. It had the, how many days without
the safety board.
Yeah. And I think in the time I was there, it got up to 82 one time. And, that meant you guys got a day off. I was in the 35th Signal Brigade. And so I was up the street at Smoke Bomb Hill. But, yeah, it got to 82 one time.
Yeah, I was in the 3rd of the 505th. And I think we saw 4-day weekends twice because we made it to 82.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of sad to think about it, that they couldn't reach 82 days without
Oh, yeah.
So you spent 3 years at Bragg, and then you go to Fort Lewis, Washington, which you're from Washington, right? You're from that area? Okay. So you go to where were you at Washington? What unit? What's the brigade that's there?
23rd Infantry.
Okay.
What was
that like?
It was pretty cool. I was in the same unit as Toby Nunn.
Yeah.
I met Toby 10 minutes before I got in my first gunfight.
So did you join as an 11X, or did you join with a contract as an 11B?
I was airborne infantry by contract.
Okay. So you didn't get to just kind of thrown into 11 Mike or
No,
whatever.
no.
So for
And I
you
had
to
a
end up
bunch.
with a striker is a little different.
It was actually super easy because there was a big push to get people from both mechanized and light infantry into that unit.
Okay.
So that way, because um there was no book on how to use them in combat. We had to create it.
Right. Well, and I guess the downside is striker's not an airborne unit.
Yeah.
You
I
can
was
use-
okay with it. I think I jumped like, I'll guess low because I'd have to pull out my log, but I want to say it was like 46 times in 2.5 years, and that's a lot.
yeah. Yeah. I know. I remember when I was there, you guys were jumping all the time.
I was ready to be done. When I was young, I took every jump I could get my hands on, and then halfway through, I was like, I'm stupid. Like, why
You
am
probably about 2 inches shorter because
yeah.
bones compressed. So how long were you at in the striker unit before your first deployment?
Let's see. I showed up in 2000, summer of 2000, and we deployed in October of 03 to Missoula
Okay.
for deployment.
Okay. So you had some time there.
Yeah.
To mess with the strikers before you.
Like,
Uh,
yeah. Well, a lot of our training at first was like we were using Hummers and like flashing our lights to pretend it was the RWS, like for training. Excuse me. Then we borrowed a lot of labs from Canada, and we
Okay.
used those. And they're like, "Forget about the turret. You're not getting a turret. Like, don't touch it." But at least it gave us a feel for how the vehicles reacted, like driving with the weight and everything.
Did you do any time down there at Fort Polk training or?
We did a back-to-back.
Yeah.
I think we went to NTC first and then to Fort Polk.
Okay.
We literally jumped from one to the other.
Right. That's a lot of railheading.
Yes, unfortunately, I was the battalion guy for that detail
Right.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're training up, brand new unit, brand new equipment, right? Like you said, there's no manual, there's no tactics, no nothing. How were y'all developing tactics? I mean, were y'all just kind of taking tactics from Bradley's, or what were y'all doing?
I mean, it was literally the higher ups were literally brainstorming like, okay, this works for mechanized, this works for light. How do we combine the two? And then we also had we had tankers embedded with us, and they would end up having the ATGM or the tow missile variant. And so like it was literally just like, how do we do this? Like we would do things like go to Camp Rylea down at the Oregon coast, National Guard base, and they've got a mount site for mainly 275 there. And it was literally a bunch of leaders that went down with a few guys that knew how to drive the strikers. And it was to the point where we're like, okay, let's see if we can go from the air sentry hatches through a second story window. Like, let's try all the things and see what we think will work the best.
Right. So for striker, if I remember, I was signal, but I had a lot of friends that were in different like cav and stuff like that. So for a striker, is everybody trained on every position?
When we deployed the first time, everybody all the way up to the battalion commander had a driver's license for the striker. So that way, if things went hairy in any kind of way, anybody could jump in and drive.
Okay.
Or be a vehicle commander.
Right. Okay.
And that way the squad leaders knew how to better implement the vehicle.
Right. So you 2003, y'all are deploying. These first time in country, right? And this is your first deployment, right?
Yeah.
Other than sitting in Kuwait.
First combat
deployment. So you get there. What was the tempo like in 03?
You know, it was a little slow at first. And we were relieving the 101st, and they had been worked pretty hard to push all the way north to Mosul.
Okay.
And so we did our right seat, left seat rides, and it seemed like all the powers that be are like, oh, this whole concept is gonna fail. Like, you're gonna replace a division with a brigade. Like, how's that going to work? Or like a battalion is going to hold what a brigade had held.
Right. So
And
what was 101st using? Were they just using armored Humvees and
yeah.
okay. Okay.
And well, that early it was, I mean, if they were up armored, it's because they went to junkyards and pulled out steel.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like they were sandbagged up.
Right. So you get there. How did these vehicles react to that environment?
You know, I'm not gonna lie. Coming from an airborne infantry unit, I hated everything about it. I was like, I hate this vehicle. Let me out of it. Like, I want to. If it's gonna happen, I want to see it coming. I don't want to be stuck in a armored coffin.
Right.
And you know, the first time we rolled through an IED and nobody got hurt, and we had a couple flat tires, but we were able to just Charlie Mike back to base.
Right.
It was like, oh, okay. Like if we were in a Hummer, that would have been a lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Or almost anything else.
Yeah.
So so you get there, right, and you're taking over 101st. Was did the mission change from what they were doing to what you were doing, because you're basically a different unit, right? You're different tactics, different, posture, everything. So
you know, like I'm not bagging on them because they went through a lot, and God only knows what was in their heads at the time. But it felt like we had to mend some relationships locally in order to accomplish anything.
Right.
And so once we were able to do that, that helped a lot.
Okay.
And we spent a lot of time out of the wire, like a lot of time out of the wire. So they saw us all the time.
Right. So yeah, so that's a pretty good tempo if you're outside all the time. I mean,
Yep.
So what was that time doing? I mean, other than just, hearts and minds, did y'all have any high value targets? Did y'all have any, or was it just basically be seen as a force, to kind
It
of
was
keep
a little
peace?
of both. And we always had a QRF ready to go if things teed off. But like we would do a lot of raids acting on intel that were dry holes.
Okay.
Like I remember when that American went over there and wanted to start a cell phone company or something. We went looking for him because we had him, and they're like, no, you have to let him go. And then he got captured. So then we went looking for him, but it was too late.
Right. Right. So how did your tactics change from, excuse me, from what y'all had been training in NTC and JRTC? From what, because we all know once you get there, the handbook goes out the window, right? I mean,
oh yeah, totally. I mean, when we got there, we did not have a set ROE until the day we rolled out of Kuwait, and we drove from Kuwait all the way to Mosul.
Oh wow!
Because we don't have to put the strikers on trucks; you just get in and go.
Right. What's the maximum speed of a striker?
Without the bird cage on it, it'd probably roll about 70.
Oh wow!
With the cage, you're probably looking at high 50s.
Right. Still, that's pretty good.
Yeah, oh yeah. Especially, I mean, it's like 33,000 pounds.
I remember that when Fort Bragg got those LMTVs first, and they had major problems with them because of the angle of the drive shafts, and
could not go over 35 miles an hour.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about going to the field sucked.
We did it on detail cycle DRF 9 or whatever it is, or 7. We got tasked to SEER school, and coming back from Camp McCall, only being able to go 30. I was like, man, I'd rather walk.
Yeah, it's miserable. Terrible. It's miserable. And like I said, I was in a commo unit, so we all of our equipment is on trucks, and so there's no walking. Everything's got to go. So you're out there. You've got the manuals now out the window. Tactics, you're probably just making it up on the fly, right? I mean, because the enemy's changing as well, right? So everything is adapting all the time, especially early on. So what was that like?
It was interesting. I mean, there was always this, like, we're gonna try and, like, you can split sections, but you want to try and stay within a block or two of each other. That way, if one half of your platoon gets engaged, the other can maneuver. And then, oh, by the way, you got a QRF like 5 minutes down the road if you need them.
Right.
And that worked out pretty well.
Okay. So, what other things changed in that? I mean, from what you guys were, and did you guys have to in these changes as you were changing tactics? Were you guys having to? Was there any kind of documentation? Was there anybody reporting this type of information back to higher ups, going, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, because as the military goes, right, as you try things, somebody's going to put it in a book somewhere, right, and it's going to
Yeah.
end up in a school for training.
The,
So,
it was kind of a nonstop evolution,
right,
honestly.
okay,
And then we would go through in Mosul, especially, we would go through these, like, it would be quiet, but because of where it sat geographically, the insurgents, that was like their first stop coming into country.
right,
So we kind of had this like plan where it's like, okay, if things like really tee off, you guys are going to go to this OP and you're going to go to this OP. And it was all like one massive interlocking sectors of fire from rooftops.
right. Okay. So you said you met Toby, what, you said 5 minutes before you deployed?
Literally. Well, not
Literally?
before we deployed. We were already in country, and I went from one company to Toby's and ended up as an AG in his weapons squad. And as he's like introducing me to the guys in the squad, and he's like, "Yeah, we're on QRF." A freaking Chinese rocket goes off, and he's like, "Welcome to the company. Get your stuff on. We're gonna go get shot at."
Nice, nice. What was it like working with Toby?
uh, you know, like I knew him by reputation, but I didn't know him at the time.
Okay.
And like sometimes you meet a new leader, and you're like, "Okay, does this guy know his stuff?" And then other times you meet a new leader, and you're like, "Okay, I will follow you. Let's go."
Right.
And that was definitely Toby.
Definitely Toby. Okay. So how long was this first deployment?
That one was pretty much right on a year.
Oh wow. That's a pretty good amount.
We hadn't started the 18-month yet.
Okay. So anything exciting going on? I mean, it's of course it's all it's all new to you. Your first combat deployment. You're constantly, you're probably running into engagements on a regular basis. You have some down days, some not, right? But anything stand out?
It was almost like we had, I can't remember if it was May 9th or April 9th, but we got into a doozy, and that was the day that I met Toby.
Okay.
But it seemed like every 3 months the city would just go nuts, and then
Yeah.
it would be kind of quiet, and like there'd be little stuff here and there, but like it was almost a constant struggle to not get complacent, because you knew as soon as you did, it's like, oh, surprise, we're gonna play again.
What do you think brought that about? You think it was just new bodies to the line, or what do you think brought it about?
I almost partly probably how we ran operations. It would probably take that long for them to figure something out.
Right.
But I think they would almost I think the insurgency would almost sit back and be like, maybe if we wait long enough, they'll let their guard down, and then we can be stupid again.
Right. Yeah. So were you? So you mentioned something I wanted to kind of talk about. You talking about the insurgents coming in. Were you going up against people from other countries? Did you?
I would say after a few months of us being with the 101st already being there, a few months of us being there doing raids and looking for caches and all that,
Mhm.
I would say after a few months, almost everything we dealt with was insurgents for the most part.
Okay.
Like we had one day where they literally rolled up in a freaking Greyhound style bus and started offloading right in front of a 50 cal tower at the airport in Mosul, and we're just like, is this really happening right now? Like, is it this easy?
Did you guys do any joint operations with other countries?
We did a lot of stuff with the let's see, the Fijians. One of the things with the Striker when we were in Mosul is like we had our area in Mosul, but the Striker you could just drive and go. So like we would go to Tulafar or Al Hay. Like we bounced all over the country when there was a need.
Right. What was it like working with some of these other countries?
Definitely different. They don't exactly operate the way we do, but it always felt like everybody had the same idea. Like let's just do what we got to do so we can get the hell out of here.
Right. What were these? What were the vehicles for these other countries? I mean, you guys are running around in these brand new, shiny, you, brand new to the military equipment. And what are these guys running around in?
Oh, we saw BRDMs, BMPs,
Nice,
trucks driving around with Dishkas.
nice, nice. So, anything else on this first deployment stand out? And what was your, what were you thinking as your first deployment? You're like, hell yeah, this is what I signed up for.
I mean, a little bit of that and a little bit of like, this really, I wanted to do this. Like, am I stupid?
I think a lot of us probably said that as soon as we got to basic training.
you,
Uh,
you got guys that are like, they're all gung ho before you go. And I'm like, like, let's just see how it goes when we get there.
nice, nice. So you go back to Fort Lewis, right? And then what are you doing? I mean, infantry is
So,
nothing but training all the time anyway, right?
oh yeah, I had actually re-enlisted in Iraq on the first tour to stay. They had offered a really good incentive package if you re-enlisted to stay in the unit, that you would get like some serious stabilization. I was like, hey, I'm already in my home state. This is great. Like, this is a pretty good unit. I want to stay. So
Right.
listed for 6 more years, and I knew that was the one that if I stayed beyond that, it was indefinite time.
Right. What's your rank at this point?
When we came back from the first tour, sergeant.
Sergeant. Okay. So you get back to Fort Lewis, and then what are you guys doing? Is it back to JRTC? Is it back to,
I mean, fight back to JRTC. We actually struggled to be able to train when we first got back. We've got all these new soldiers waiting for us, and we need to train them. And we have some people leaving, but we maintained a lot of our combat experience, which was huge.
Right.
And the unit had already been together because of the whole, everybody's locked in because of the transformation. Like, the unit as a whole had been locked in longer than probably any unit that deployed to Iraq for the rest of the war.
Okay.
Because you're talking guys that have been locked in with each other for 18 months.
Right. Yeah. That's you can't replace that.
And we retained, I think, around half of that, if not better, when it came to the second deployment.
Yeah, that's still pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But we're trying to train, and we're bottom of the list because other units are getting ramped up to go before us. So like, we had to get creative. We'd like go to Yakima, or we'd go to a National Guard base at the Oregon coast, like anywhere we could go to train.
Right. What's the performance on these strikers? I mean, being brand new, I mean, were there a lot of bugs to work out, or?
I think we did pretty good working the bugs out with the amount of training we did. Like, we took them up to Yakima when we first got them, and we worked out a lot of bugs.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were some issues, and then there was, I mean, even when we were in theater, they're like, okay, we're going to upgrade this, or we're going to upgrade that. And then we came back from the first tour, and they're like, we're going to upgrade a whole lot now. And I mean, I wouldn't even recognize the strikers they're running around in now because they have V-holes. They don't have boxes in the troop compartment. They have jump seats.
Right. Right.
And now they're getting ready to go back to, they're going to put turrets with heavy guns on 2 per platoon in an infantry unit now.
That's definitely changing tactics right there. I mean, that's combining a lot of different things.
Yeah, plus gunnery.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys, for strikers, do you have any mortars? Any mortars go with that?
There was a mortar variant. Essentially,
Okay.
imagine a skylight that could open up and they could shoot a 120 from inside the striker.
Wow. I can only imagine the concussion inside. So you're back to Fort Lewis. You're training again, and you said you were at the bottom of the list. How many units were ahead of you?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, because we had grown a lot. I mean, at one point, every unit within the 23rd was actually at Fort Lewis.
Okay. Who replaced you guys at overseas?
Let's see. We were 3rd Brigade, 1st Brigade.
Okay.
2nd Infantry replaced us, and we left our vehicles, and they fell in on our vehicles, and then we came back to Fort Lewis and took theirs, just to avoid shipping more goods.
You mean common sense? That doesn't happen very often.
Who knew?
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Um, so you're back in Fort Lewis. You're training. How long were you back before you deployed again?
Let's see. We came back in October of '04, and we deployed again in late June of '06.
Oh, okay. So you were back for a pretty good amount of time. You're back as long as you were deployed.
Yeah,
So okay.
but half of that was like right back into an ITC.
Right, right. So you get ready to deploy again. What was it like the second time versus the first time?
The second time was quite a bit different. I ended up marrying the girl that lived next door to me since we were 8 years old till we graduated high school, and that was
Okay.
like maybe 5 weeks before we left. Like they gave me a
Oh
4-day
wow.
weekend to go get married, and then like I said, we left in late June. Um, Originally we were supposed to fall in on the same footprint, like same platoon AOs. We were loving life. We're like, this is awesome. Like we know where the checkpoints are and the phase lines. And then right before we were gonna push north, they're like, Frago, you're going to Baghdad. And we're
Ah,
like, has anybody taken strikers to Baghdad yet? They're like, no. And we're like, well, that's gonna be interesting. And so they do the what do they call it? The MACOM brief, the threat brief, like
mm,
what's going on currently. And the first slide is an Abram with its turret on the ground. And I'm looking at the kid beside me and I'm like, those are a lot stronger than strikers.
yeah, yeah. A lot heavier too. So what's the weight on a striker? Any idea?
About 33,000 pounds, depending on the variant.
Yeah, I think an M1 is what, 70 tons, something like that.
Ish.
Yeah, yeah. I think the M1A2 I think is a little heavier because it's got the auto loader. Um, so how was this second deployment and your tactics? How was that different versus the first
So, the second deployment, ROEs were a lot more strict.
one? Right.
I got sidetracked somehow earlier, but on the first deployment, we didn't have an ROE at all until the night before we left to go to Iraq.
Well, life is a little easier in some respects that way. I
Yeah,
mean, when you get too restrictive in ROE, you're like your hands are tied, right?
we're like chomping at the battalion commander. We're like, hey, like we gotta have an ROE. Like, what are we telling these kids? And finally, he's like, look, use if you feel threatened, use whatever means necessary to eliminate the threat. And we're like, okay, that works.
Right. So you get there the second time, and now you've got an established ROE, right?
Oh yeah, and it was more like CSI Baghdad. Like we would literally, like, if you couldn't knock them down in time and they surrendered and you knew better, so you had to take them in, and then you'd take them to the detainee holding facility, and they'd be like, oh, you don't have enough evidence, and they'd let them go, and you'd see the same guys again in the next skirmish, and it's like, what are we doing?
So logistically, how are you when they surrender? How are you transporting these people
In the striker with us.
in the striker? Okay, interesting, interesting. So, was there any difference? Had you seen any difference in the equipment? Was there any upgrades? Was there
Oh
anything
yeah, like
between the first and the second?
we had blast shields on the squad leader hatches and the air hatches and netting. Like
Right,
there was a lot more. Let's try and protect people more from blast, and let's try to protect people more from sniper fire.
right. So what was the tempo like that second time? Was it a little more action?
You know, it like we dealt more with IEDs, and they were more like EFPs.
Right,
That was the new toy, and we definitely took some more casualties. And when towards the end of my deployment, because I wasn't there very long on the second one, we were basically doing a pre-surge to see if the idea of a surge in Baghdad would work.
okay.
And later down the road, ultimately, they decided yes, it would work, and that's
Right.
the way it went, and it worked well. But
Right. Yeah, the IEDs from the beginning until even right at the end. I mean, that was a whole complete change, across the board on how they were, very, very simplified and crude, almost like just, pressure to now you're getting into remote detonation and things like that as we talked about briefly, the tactics change.
Oh
So
yeah.
what were you seeing as far as the techniques used in the IEDs?
Oh, one, secondaries, targeting those coming to help. That was a huge thing with secondary explosions. And then like I said earlier, the EFPs.
All right.
The
So
yeah,
so you hit an IED. Do you dismount? You dismount and set a perimeter? I mean, is that what you?
it depends. If the vehicle that gets hit
Mhm.
is able to keep driving, you want to get out of that kill zone.
Right.
And so
Okay.
you'll push through. But if it's disabled, then you've got to set up security, evac. Do you torch the vehicle?
Right.
Like get all the sensitive stuff out, or what's going on there?
So is that where you were also seeing some of these secondary IEDs? I mean,
Yeah.
for waiting for people to dismount.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. It's crazy that that how those tactics just continued to evolve.
They
So
were, if nothing else, they were adaptive as all hell.
right. But I mean, combat on both sides is always adaptive, right? I
Oh,
mean, initial deployments for any, you're always fighting with the previous war's tactics and the previous war's equipment, right? And then as you continue to go on, you develop and new equipment and new tactics. So so um so you mentioned you weren't there that long, so let's get into that a little bit.
so like I said, we deployed in late June of '06. On the
Hmm.
16th of October in '06, we were doing fixed site security at checkpoint 105 across from RPG Alley.
Hmm.
And basically, we had gotten tired. It was almost like a bad scene from the Green Zone. We had gotten tired of going back out and pulling guards so the engineers could rebuild this checkpoint because the Iraqis abandoned it at night. And then they
Okay.
just come torch it. And there was an abandoned house, and all the houses look like compounds. So they're like, hey, let's turn this into like their guard shack. They're going to stay here. We're tired of this.
Right.
One of the first things they tell you in your threat brief is don't sit in one spot too long. You become a mortar magnet. Alpha Company had been there all night without incident. So we roll out to relieve them, and we set up our four corners of security. We got some guys on the roof, and the lieutenant's inside. And the lieutenant calls me up on the radio and he's like, hey, I want you to move your truck to where you're pretty much going to back up to the opening of the gate for the compound. So if anything tees off, everybody inside's protected. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And no sooner than we put it in park, we hear the most insane explosion. And we've heard like their equivalent to like 60 millimeter mortars. And this wasn't that. It was like shake your bones out of your skin explosion.
Mm.
And with the vehicle spun up and running, you couldn't tell that it was a mortar round. And we immediately start taking small arms and RPGs. So we nose into it and we're calling it up. We just assume since it's in the middle of the MSR, we're like, oh, it's premature IED debt. And so I'm talking to the lieutenant on the radio. And the next thing I know, because I'm standing exposed out of the squad leader hatch on the striker, I see the mortar round that gets me land in front of the nose of the striker. And I'm like, uh-oh. And so then I'm inside, and it's only a split second, but it's that moment of like, what just happened? And my rounds from all my magazines are everywhere. And I'm like, oh, cheap freaking magazines. And I'm like spitting out part of my jaw and stuff. And I'm like, uh-oh, like this isn't good. And my gunner didn't even want to look over. He's like, you came down so fast. Like, I thought you got decapitated. And
Wow.
so as soon as he heard me complaining, he's like, oh, he's going to be okay. And he looks at me, and I feel stuff running down the side of my face. And I'm like trying to wipe it off. And he grabs my hand. He's like, you don't want to do that. And I'm like, what? Like, what the hell's going on? And he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, you're going to be okay, Sergeant. And I'm like, okay, step one, check. Step two, like, how bad is it? And he's like, your eyes hanging out of your head. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
So concussion?
Oh,
Any concussion from that? Yeah.
yeah. They they couldn't. they didn't have a baseline or anything. So they're like, look, there's, and they later, the crater analysis said it was a 120.
Mm,
So they're like, look, there's no way you can be that close and not have some sort of TBI.
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
not possible.
So how close is the closest medic at this point?
Inside that compound, but we're getting just raked with
Right.
small arms, machine gun fire, RPG.
Right.
And the lieutenant's like, I'm sending you the medic. And he's like, you need to get their heads down before you send the medic. Because the one thing we don't need is a shot up medic.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So how long was it until the medic shows up?
Oh, just a few minutes. And I mean, it sounds bad, but like you couldn't ask for a better set of injuries as far as being stable after the fact. Like somehow I got clipped with a ricochet in the shoulder and it just cauterized right through.
Okay.
That wasn't bleeding. And because of the tear ducts and all that stuff and the saliva, because of the jaw stuff, like there was a whole lot of blood, but it was real bright red and like thin. So it was like, okay, like there's not a whole lot to panic about here. It's not ideal, but it's not bad.
Okay. So what was going through your mind?
Pretty much that. Well, I'm not gonna die today. Like that was all I was gonna focus on that. And I'm like taking my radio off and grabbing my keys to the squad box, like night vision goggles, like all my stuff's laid out. So when the senior team leader, who is also, by the way, a very young E5 that was about to become a very young E6, comes back, I'm like, squad's yours, buddy. Here's everything you need.
Was Toby on this deployment with you?
No. Toby was, God, who was he with at that point? Fourth ID, maybe?
Okay.
He was with us on the first tour and then went to another unit. I think he might have been deployed in the guard at that point. Okay. Because I think he was going to school.
So you start dumping equipment. Medic comes over, starts patching you up. Where do they send you after that?
You know, we went back because we were within eyesight of Fob Liberty. So we went first to the aid station. And I'm like, life, limb, or eyesight. Why aren't we going to the cache? But whatever.
Right.
So we go to the unit aid station and the PA's like, all right, take him to the green zone. And I'm like, I feel like we could have just went there. But the cool thing is my platoon sergeant didn't mess around, and he had already, like, I had been wounded superficially wounded previously and had to be evac'd. And my platoon sergeant basically got scolded for splitting section. So what he did is he took what was left of my squad and parted us out on 2 vehicles and left 2 vehicles as overwatch and the rest of the platoon on site. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, okay. Well, once I really, really got hurt, he didn't hesitate to do it again. So like we could hear the platoon in a gunfight as they're taking me into the aid station. Then they take me to the green zone and they're like, all right, we got to go. Bye.
So did they fly you? They fly you to Germany, or where did you go?
You know, I stayed at the green zone. Like they removed bone fragment, metal fragment, basically just stabilized, removed what was left of my eye. Mm-hmm. And that was like 8-hour surgery right out the gate.
Wow.
And then I stayed the next night. Then they took me and, you know, not sleeping, being pretty drugged up, a lot of pain. They take me to Fob Anaconda, and I'm like, wait a minute, I just survived a freaking mortar attack, and you send me to the one place that gets mortared the most? Bullshit, send me somewhere else. And they're like, I don't think you realize you don't have a say-so in this.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're a captive audience at this point.
And then I was there for one night. Then I went to Germany from there. I was at Germany for one night. I mean, I was at Walter Reed the next day. Like I got hurt on the 6th of October and I landed at Portland Airport with my wife and my dad on the 16th of October.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Like really fast around.
I mean, you're almost landing in Ramstein, Germany just to refuel. And then, I mean,
pretty much once they took bone fragment out, the metal fragment out, removed what was left of my eye, there was nothing they could really do until that all healed to start the reconstructive process anyway.
Right. So how much did you lose in that they had to, I'm assuming it's titanium now.
Yeah, the cheekbone is titanium plate. The temple was shattered, but that's superficial, so they just clean out bone fragment and leave it.
Okay.
Fracture on the skull behind the eyebrow. Fractured the mandible joint. I lost a horizontal portion of my jaw and a couple teeth on the opposite side, and I think that was from the Duke antenna because that turned into its own little source of shrapnel.
Right.
And then the ricochet through the shoulder.
Right.
Cool thing about that is it cauterized. So
yeah,
other than my poor wife having to pack both sides of that every day for a month.
you gotta give it to military wives, man. They the unsung heroes. So yeah, I've got two titanium plates over above and below my left eye from a car accident that I was flung out of a vehicle.
I could feel my pulse where my cheekbone was supposed to be. I was like, okay, my cheekbone's toast.
So you weren't at Walter Reed very long, and they just sent you.
Yeah, they couldn't even do anything. Now, my primary doctor wanted to keep me there, and that was before they started farming people to different major medical facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And my primary doctor was very adamant about wanting me to stay there. And I'm like, look, my family's in Washington. There's a major medical facility at Fort Lewis. Like, here's the deal. You can either give me orders and plane tickets, or you're going to be explaining to the freaking media why I bought them myself and I'm a staff sergeant. Guess what? I can afford to do that.
Right.
And I know my rights. I'm going to refuse medical treatment and I'm going to sign in to my rear detachment within 24 hours and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I was like, those are your choices. And he's getting really mad because now you got an officer with a staff sergeant telling him how it's going to go. And that went about as well as you'd think it would. But the ophthalmologist at Walter Reed looks at him and he's like, hey, sir, I'm not trying to tell you what to do in this situation, but the guy that trained me is at Madigan. Maybe you should let him go.
Yeah.
Because my whole mindset was, look, my family's life doesn't stop because of this.
Sure.
Like, I'm not going to expect them to uproot and be here for the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, and your mental wellness, leads to your physical wellness, right?
Yeah,
If you're where
I am there.
if you're where your family is and you're surrounded by family, that's better for you mentally and physically.
Like here we have my parents and extended family and my wife's parents and extended family, people that I've known since I was a kid. It's like, home is better. Let's do that.
Yeah. Madigan's a pretty big facility too.
And it was great.
Yeah. So how long were you, how long were you down for before they said, okay, now we got to make a decision?
I would say, I was on convalescent leave from coming home from Walter Reed and went straight to Madigan and was like, all right, how do we get this started?
Right.
And unfortunately that sent me straight to the Warrior Transitional Battalion. Like, you can't be doing a med board and not go here.
Okay.
But it took about 2.5 years of reconstructive surgery because after all the scandals of people getting pushed out of the guard before they were put back together, they would not let me leave until I was done.
Okay.
So prosthetic eye, everything, oral surgery to try and fix everything with the jaw.
Yeah. And you said they gave you an option. They could put you out or put you behind a desk, and you weren't interested in being behind a desk.
Infantry getting my first look for E7, I knew better. Like, I had this major when I went through the med board process, and he's like, I can't legally tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you what I would do in your situation. He's like, if you get out now, you're going to make more money than if you stay in for 10 more years.
Yeah.
And I might have made 7, but I never would have been promoted again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you're stuck behind a desk, who knows? The military changes.
It would be a lot like being a lieutenant. Like, my privates would know more than I would about the job. Like, I'd know it on paper, but not experience.
Right. Okay. So you get out, and then what do you do?
So honestly, I didn't know what to do with myself. I threw myself into volunteering with a local organization, Northwest Battle Buddies, doing service dogs for veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Couple like the VFW locally, I had a Battle of the Bulge survivor scoop me up and take me down to VFW and sign me up and get me involved. And that helped a lot. And then one of the guys I served with, I was roommates with him at one point. He started doing a nonprofit for veterans based off of something he loved before the Army, and it was MMA.
Okay.
And so he got into it, saw the benefit, then he started exposing other veterans to it. And I kind of used that and went back to salmon fishing because that's what I loved. That's what I loved. Sorry, I got to let the dog out.
That's right.
That's what I loved before the Army. So I was like, why not? And it was an instant hit.
Yeah.
And then one of my buddies that I served with wasn't doing well. Cash. He wasn't doing well. So I'm like, okay, let me take you fishing. And after a weekend, I could like with lighter. And so then I just tried to start doing it on my own. And at a certain point, I decided I was going to start my own nonprofit. Reached out to Toby, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to run a business, or do you want to just take veterans fishing?" And I'm like, "I just want to take veterans fishing." And he's like, "Hey, I volunteer with this nonprofit in Texas, and we don't have salmon fishing, so let us help you. Just take veterans fishing. We got you."
Right.
And so I was the Northwest Outreach Coordinator for Veteran Outdoors for 5 or 7 years.
Right.
And then when Toby left Veteran Outdoors to pursue red rum sport fishing in Cabo, that was kind of the point for me. And Toby, I tell my wife to blame Toby. I was like, so what do you think I should do next? And he's like, I think you should get your guide license and start a business. And that's what I ended up doing. And the cool thing is there's a place in Tacoma, Washington called Flagship Maritime.
Mm-hmm.
And they take GI Bill benefits. And so I was like, awesome. I'm actually going to use this for something.
Okay. So running a business, I mean, how's that, you go from being in infantry, splitting skulls to fishing for a living. I mean, that's the ultimate story.
The beauty is being a fishing guide. Let's just say the Army, especially the infantry, gave me a lot of endurance that I needed. So, priorities at work.
Right.
Oh man, I'm really tired. I want to go to bed. Oh, I got to tie leaders for tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And getting up at sometimes 2 a.m, sometimes 4 a.m. Just I have no patience for shenanigans at boat ramps. So I want to be like the first 2 or 3 people to launch my boat and get my stuff ready, and then just sit there and relax for a while until clients show up.
Boat ramps are infamous for shenanigans. It doesn't matter what state, where you're at. There's always something that you can sit there and just watch people watch at a boat ramp.
Well, and the more they regulate our salmon seasons and less opportunity we have, the worse it gets. So
Yeah.
It's like the powers that be in Washington and Oregon are piling a bunch of people up in one spot, and that makes it all worse.
Yeah.
Because I have no patience to sit in line for an hour to launch my boat.
Right. Yeah. So do you pretty much go to the same launch point, or do you branch out, and is there
No,
go?
I mean, I've got a fishery up at Baker Lake on the northern border of Washington for sockeye, and that's a 7-hour drive.
Oh wow.
So needless to say, I stay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or when I fish the coast at the mouth of the Columbia where it meets the Pacific, I'll stay down there for about 45 days because that's a 2-hour drive from the house.
Okay.
But if it's a fishery that's within an hour of my house, I come home every night.
Nice. So do you have any downtime, any part of the season that's you can't fish for anything?
Most of what I do is trolling for salmon, and that gives me about 7 months out of the year.
Okay.
And then I do catch and release sturgeon for the other 2.
Okay.
And then that gives me the winter off, and all I do in the winter is maybe jump on a buddy that's a guide, jump on his boat to go steelhead fishing,
Okay.
or My I don't know if you saw pictures of the boat dog on the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
I have a freakishly large black lab that he likes to be on the boat, but he loves to chase ducks.
Okay.
So
You do any duck hunting?
yeah, that's if I'm doing anything in the winter, I'm
Yeah.
taking the dog and I'm sitting in a blind, and it's great when there's birds, but I don't care if there's birds or not.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting in a blind, nothing else matters.
You say a freakishly large dog. I've got a 130-pound Great Pyrenees on the floor behind me.
Yeah, mine's a lab, and we think there may be a little Great Dane in there,
Yeah.
but he is 106 pounds
Pretty big. That's a big lab.
and he's freakishly tall.
So let's kind of back up a little bit and talk about, I'd mentioned at the beginning your thoughts going in. I mean, you're an airborne infantry. You knew what you were getting into.
Yeah.
Versus, you just got sent home from your second deployment. What is your take on, everything that happened over there? It to include, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, because I know that's kind of a sore point for a lot of people.
I actually never went to Afghanistan, but I felt like there was a whole lot of parallels to Vietnam and lessons that weren't learned or lessons that should have been learned that were forgotten.
Right.
Hey, let's tell them we're leaving. Let's tell them exactly when we're leaving.
Right. Anything else? I mean, what's your thought on just Iraq and that whole thing?
I'm not gonna lie, it stung a little watching Mosul fall.
Yeah.
And I was super happy when the 82nd sent a brigade in there to kick the snot out of ISIS, because Pat Work was the brigade commander, and he was actually my first company commander at Fort Lewis.
Okay.
And they also dropped like a 5,000 pounder on the Asher Hotel. So no soldier will ever have to run up 14 flights of stairs again. Because, we'll go back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Middle East has been a hot spot for a long time. So, all right. Well, anything else about any of your deployments? Anything you want people to know? I mean, anything you saw, did, any engagements, anything?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they felt uneventful. Like I've never wanted to be the guy to oversell what I did.
Right.
It always kind of felt like it was like, okay, what's going on? And then something would happen, and then it would be quiet again, and then something would happen.
Right. I mean, you'd mentioned before about, some of the people were, happy you were there. Was that the same on your second deployment? I mean, was it kind of the same response, or had things changed?
No, it always felt like we made the area better.
Okay.
For the most part, the response was as receptive as it could be.
Okay. Your second deployment, did you have to go, because you said, that not to knock on the 101st, but they were just kind of there and maybe, didn't make things as good as they could have been. Was that the same? I mean, because you're kind of replacing your previous unit or one of your other sister units. Was that the same the second time, or was it a little easier?
The second tour, we replaced 4th ID, and it felt like a little, there was less, like, it didn't seem like we had to fix some things.
Was 4th ID using strikers at this point?
No, Bradleys and tanks.
Okay. So again, you're going back with the strikers, still fairly new equipment. I mean, relative compared to some of the stuff in the military. No issues, but tactics probably changed a little bit. You said that there were some upgrades. How were the tactics changing a little bit in that second?
How we would necessarily roll into like an objective.
Okay.
Like not necessarily ducks in a row, like maybe offset, like one section going down one street and then another section, another street a block away.
How different was Baghdad, the city, versus Mosul?
Oh, it was insane. Just the size difference.
Yeah.
But it was also easier to maneuver. Mosul, because you're talking about Old Town, Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
if you weren't careful, you would end up going down some crazy maze and get like stuck. Like either the striker wouldn't fit through it or it would just dead end.
Mm.
Like you would feel like a mouse in a freaking science experiment maze.
And Baghdad's a little more laid out, a little easier layout.
A little more maneuverable.
Okay.
Like they would
Okay.
try to push up cars, like block the entry to Maholas with cars, and we got to go straight monster trucking over them. It was awesome.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, anything else about either of these that you want people to know?
No, I mean, like I've had people be like, "Oh, you're a hero," and I'm like, I just didn't duck when I should have. I should have ducked.
I had a guy by the name of JP Cervantes on, former Green Beret, and he said that he heard someone say this, that when they say thank you for your service, and the response he now uses is "you were worth it." To the person saying that to you, the simple response is "you were worth it," and you hear that kind of the Band of Brothers and everything, or not Band of Brothers. What's the one with Tom Hanks? Be the person, that you want everybody to know.
Serving a sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right, sir. Well, I thank you for your evening. Thank you for sharing your stories with us, and yeah, I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just give me 1 minute.